have to transform this one block into a thriving paradise. To make things interesting, I'm gonna do this over the course of 100 days in Minecraft Hardcore mode. Sit back, relax, and don't forget to leave a like. This is 100 days and 1 block hardcore. You want to play mod packs with friends, but you can't seem to find a good server. And the free ones? With the big mod packs these days, free servers are just too laggy. Luckily for you, there's BISECT hosting. They host my server, and with plenty of affordable options, they can host your server too. And the best part is, they support almost every mod pack. Use code DOUBLESAL at checkout for 25% off your first order. BISECT hosting, a great site for great servers. 1 block, or should I say one of many blocks. The fact is, we were going to spend a lot of our time standing in this spot, but I did have plans to expand. And for now, a simple platform was gonna do. Anything to keep us from falling down below. Same goes for our blocks. Unfortunately, not every block is immune to the effects of gravity, so we had to place something underneath to get those items. What followed was a long grind, breaking the same block over and over again. As monotonous as this may seem, the game was able to spice things up in the form of upgrades which came as biome phases. We had entered phase 1. Now the plains biome is pretty basic, but it does come with its fair share of mobs. I was expecting an influx of cows, pigs, chickens, sheep. I didn't know how many times they were going to spawn, so I had to keep them alive if I was going to breed them in the future. I continued to break blocks while the mobs just stood there and watched me awkwardly. From chests that had spawned, I was able to gather a few saplings. I expanded our platform, building a second island. This was going to be our farm. We needed wheat to breed all these animals, so I started planting the wheat seeds. I spawned another sheep, expanded the platform, and then I set up the saplings. With the wood, we were going to make the animals their own island. They could not grow fast enough because it was getting a little crowded on the other side. I had to put up with the cramped conditions and continued breaking the blocks, spawning more and more animals. Eventually, the time had come to start expanding the island even more. I built a third platform, this one for the animal farm. It was about time too, because at this point we were at capacity. It was so bad, the animals were shoving each other off the crafting table to hold the high ground. And then there was this guy who attempted and succeeded at escaping. I'm sure he'll be fine. I broke the block and stood back because we were entering the next phase. Thankfully, the transition was uneventful. I put up more fence posts for the animal farm, upgraded my tools with stone since we were now in the cave phase, checked on the trees chopped down the first of our trees, and then I began moving the animals into their new pen. And yes, they did continue to spawn in large numbers, but at least we now had a place for them. Except this guy. I didn't trust him around the others. The farm got a fence, and then a second mushroom spawned. I set him aside from the rest and put him in a corner. This was going to be my soup cow. Yes, this one was special. I returned to the 1 block and kept mining until all of a sudden our first enemy spawned, which reminded me that I hadn't slept for days. Phantoms were going to start spawning soon, so I needed a roof to cover my head. I quickly built a roof made out of slabs, and the reason I used slabs instead of blocks was because we had to make every block count, and you get 6 slabs for every 3 blocks. With that fear out of the way, it was time to prepare for the next island, this one being a dedicated tree farm. I put some railing around for protection, placed down the dirt, planted the saplings, and then I expanded our regular farm. With the saplings out of the way, we could now grow more wheat. I continued breaking blocks until we transitioned into the next phase, the tundra biome. I crafted a furnace, smelted some of my iron, and lastly, I built a 4th platform, this one just being for me. By that point, it was time to harvest from the tree farm, and in the end, this farm yielded many saplings. Once again, things were feeling a little claustrophobic, so it was time to seal in the gaps and start tearing down fences. I wanted to turn our 5 main islands into 1 big island. There needed to be enough space so that I could do a lap around and access every section of our base. I continued to collect more wood, and then I realized that it was snowing. I had no idea that the 1 block actually affected the weather. I started laying some stairs down because I had plans to expand. Now up until this point we had been expanding outwards, but I didn't want to do that anymore. I wanted to mix it up and build upwards instead. With the completion of our spiral staircase, I could now focus on building the upper level. This section, it was going to be bigger than the one below it. Now in terms of exactly how big this was going to be, I had no idea. Truthfully, I was just making this up as I went. Before I expanded any further, there were some resources I was going to need from our mobs, and well, accessing the animal farm was a little tricky because they were all mingled together. I needed to separate them into different pens. I couldn't run the risk of all of them escaping if I forgot to close the gates. With the pens complete, it was now time for the difficult part, actually separating them. It's kind of a hard thing to do when they are all attracted to wheat. It took a while, but eventually I was able to sort everything out, including the stubborn pig. With the animals now organized, we could properly breed them. As for the upper level, I was going for a circular design, which is a pretty common thing to do in these types of videos, but hey, I like the way it looks. I added 4 long platforms on each side. We would use those for later, but until now, it was just a matter of filling in the gaps. In the end, I ended up using more slabs than I could count. The platform was complete. Now it was simply a matter of figuring out what we were going to do with it. I went back to the 1 block, continued breaking it, and then a goat spawned. Maybe it was female? Do female goats not have horns? I don't know. I trapped it in a pen, but the goat said no. I trapped it a second time, taking the necessary precautions to keep the goat in place. This was followed by a wolf spawning. A greedy wolf, might I add. I had to break out the backup bones, because his hunger was ceaseless. With 1 bone left, I turned to my secret spectator, who was patiently waiting to watch me fail. All of a sudden, I got a notification saying that there was a monster party coming. My block blew up! Mobs were spawning, and I didn't have any defenses to keep them in there. I had to evacuate, so I ran up the stairs hoping that they wouldn't follow. I tried to kill them one by one, but then I got brave, and that was a serious mistake. I was almost killed! With 1 heart, I panicked and started building a little shelter out of cobblestone. I ate some melons and regenerated some of my health. Thankfully, when I came out to fight back, the monsters were all gone. Except the ones that were naturally spawning. Yeah, that was gonna be a problem. I was so relieved to see the sun rising, but I did notice that there was a monster on my platform. And once I started breaking blocks again, we moved on to the next phase, Deepslate Caves. Thankfully, I was met with good fortune, and diamonds started spawning. I was pretty excited by this because this meant that it was possible for more diamonds to spawn. Although caves don't just come with ores. I had to be very careful in this phase because I never knew what was gonna come up when I broke the block. There were a lot of dangers, especially the ones above my head. I forgot to place torches, and a ton of monsters spawned on the platform overnight. If I was gonna clear the mobs, I had to be well protected, so I crafted myself a set of iron armor. Good thing too, because the mobs began to invade the lower half of my island. After clearing out multiple enemies, I waited for the sun to rise. When I climbed to the 2nd level, I saw that there were still multiple creepers, and even some lingering spiders. Thankfully, it was nothing a bow couldn't handle. With a few arrows and punches, I was able to clear out the remaining mobs. Torches were scattered everywhere just to make sure that we wouldn't have to deal with an army of mobs every night. I placed some more fence posts, and by the time the next night came, we were well protected. Nothing was gonna spawn now. With our upper level secure, we could now start adding to it. I had the idea of adding 4 large wave-like fins on each side. For the next couple of days, I spent most of my time breaking and placing blocks just to get that shape right. At the end of the day, I was pretty satisfied with the outlines. Now, to me, they kinda looked futuristic. They were very expensive to make, so it was time to get more wood. After that, I returned to the 1 block to get more materials, when all of a sudden, these little guys spawned. I scooped one up with a bucket. I then dumped him out because I needed an infinite water source to scoop the other one up. Once I had my 2 water buckets, I went to go scoop them up again. But when I went to go collect the brown one, I saw that he was immersed in the melons, so I left him there. But axolotls weren't the only little guys to spawn. For the next few days, I was gonna be plagued with the chicken jockeys spawning. And to be honest, these were probably some of the most annoying mobs during this Let's Play. When the next monster party began, I ran outside because I knew what was gonna start spawning. Usually I'm not worried about baby zombies, but on an island where there are limited places to run, the last thing I need is a super small creature with a microscopic hitbox chasing me around at light speed. I mean, just look at this guy. He wouldn't stand still. And then they would hide behind chests, or any little nook and cranny they could get into. At the end of the day, dealing with baby zombies was an absolute pain. When the dust had settled, it was time to go back and work on our fins. Now at this point, the fins were nothing more than wooden outlines, but I did want to add an outer skin. I mostly wanted them to resemble mountains, so I used a lot of deep slate and cobblestone. I even topped the peak with some diorite and amethyst, just to add a little color. The only problem was that I was not able to duplicate this design 3 more times because I was out of every block I needed. That's when I had the idea of giving each fin its own custom design. Like the 1-block phases, each fin would have its own biome theme. And I'm so happy that the phases were diverse enough to include the ocean floor. After collecting a lot of prismarine, we were greeted by this friendly turtle. Oh, there's 2 of you. Oh, never mind. I was collecting a lot of ocean-themed blocks, but we had a surplus of moss, dirt, cobblestone, all of those blocks from the Lush Cave phase. So I ended up building what looked like a pointy grass block. It was pretty great seeing that the fins were finally taking shape. By this point, I had to go back down and reorganize my chests because there was just so much clutter and all of the blocks were scrambled everywhere. Guardians started spawning, and I thought that dealing with them was going to be easy because, well, there's no water for them to swim in. Now, I don't know if this has always been a thing. And then you had the pufferfish. I know that the game dev added this just to annoy the player. It honestly felt like guardian after guardian. I got to the point where I started to innovate ways of creatively killing them. And then the Elder Guardian spawned. When he popped in, I thought he was gonna suffocate in my blocks. Nope, he just phased right through. I'm happy we kept the cows alive because that mining fatigue, that was gonna be a pain to wait for. Oh, he didn't drop anything good. We were out of the ocean, and now we were entering the desert phase. And I'm gonna be real with you guys. This was my first encounter with a camel ever. I knew that they were a new addition, I just didn't think that they were that big. I had to break a wall down because he couldn't fit through the gate, but once he was out, it was back to work. I mined some more blocks, and to my surprise, a villager spawned. And he was followed by some unsavory companions. I'm pretty sure that had I not placed fence posts and gates, I would have been a dead man. I carefully tried to attack them one by one, trying my best not to get hit by an arrow because man, those arrows packed a punch. I then noticed that they were shooting my villager, and for some reason, he was standing on the ledge. It's like he wanted to fall off. I pushed him, and guess what? He climbed back up. When I returned to my workspace, I saw that it was in shambles. Plus, it was full of these useless mobs. I then moved us on to the next phase, Jungle Dungeon. And during this one, we got a lot of ores. I went back to the upper level to work on the 3rd fin, and up there I spotted another villager just standing on the edge. I don't know why they like to do that. Now, I had already started the 3rd fin earlier, but I ran out of sand, so I had to improvise with birch planks instead. This next fin was going to have more of a tropical ocean theme to it. Sand on the bottom, and then prismarine on top. I capped the top of the fin with dark prismarine, and then after that, I stood back and looked at how beautiful this whole thing was coming together. The next task was for me to figure out what kind of design I wanted for the next fin. What if I was to expand the platform, divide it into slices, and give each slice its own theme? So I began constructing an outer ring, one that encompassed the entire island that we already had. And I will admit, I didn't design the circle. I had to go on some Minecraft circle generator website just so that I could get the shape right. But it was absolutely worth it, because thanks to the chart that was generated, I was able to build a beautiful, clean circle. Now on the outer ring, we were going to plant a lot of trees. The tree type would correspond with the biome that we were going to work on, and if it wasn't clear enough, on every side we were going to have a different biome. A snow biome, a nether biome, a birch biome, a cherry tree biome for all of you 1.20 fans. But before we could get started, I remembered the consequences of not illuminating the platform, so I did a lap around and placed all the torches I could. It was time to start placing the dirt, and while we didn't have enough dirt to cover the entire area around, that was pretty good because I wasn't planning on just using dirt. I wanted an assortment of blocks, similar to our fins. But before I could finish designing my mesh of dirt and grass, I had to start planting the saplings. When I went back to the 1 block to get more resources, I saw that my villagers were, well, I don't know what they were doing. For the next couple of days, I ended up mining a ton of cobblestone and lots of diamonds. I even spawned this fuzzy friend. Now, a lot of things changed about Minecraft. Back in my day, you could tame an ocelot and turn it into a cat. A panda spawned shortly after, and I did my best to get this guy out of there as quickly as possible because he was suffocating. It was clear to me that we were going to need more pens for our animals because the mobs would not stop spawning. The pens were done. I searched around the island looking for the strays who had wandered off. Behind the tree farm was a turtle, local resident Kanish, and the ocelots, who were standing on a deadly platform. I tried to lure them down with fish, but every time we would make progress, they would just turn around and walk away. Kanish got a little too curious because he climbed onto the platform with me. After I had shoved him off, the ocelots finally started following me, and then they stopped and turned around again. I wasted a whole day just waiting for them. Back on the upper level, our trees had finally grown. I was gonna start work on the outer ring, but first I had to put the animals in their new pens. Once I was able to trap the last of the animals inside of their enclosures, it was finally time to take a roll call. Okay, we had the cows, mushrooms, pigs, turtles, horses, chickens, sheep. Where are the chickens? Chickens were now extinct, but that's okay because we had a panda. He didn't really do anything, but I was just happy to have him around. I went to go collect some sugarcane. Whoa! Oh, the turtle's here too. It was time to move on to the next phase. That being the mangrove swamp. But before we dug our teeth into the one block, it was time to make some changes to our main area. I was rebuilding our walls with logs instead of fence posts. Not only that, but I also had these cool frog lights I could use. I felt this place lacked color, so I added some terracotta on each corner. Added a roof, helped a horse. And yeah, I think I'm pretty happy with the way this came out. Simple, but spacious. And it's a good thing I finished it when I did, because another monster party came to give me a housewarming party. Wow, that is a lot of slime. It took a few minutes, but I was able to clear out all the slime. As for the zombie villagers, I'm guessing that they just fell down the hole? I don't know. What mattered was that the room was clear. As for the mangrove phase, pretty uneventful. But the next one? That one was my favorite. We moved on to the nether phase. The reason it was so good was because I finally got netherite. But sometimes things are too good to be true. I got a reality check. This came in the form of not one, but 2 ghasts. Of all the mobs that could have spawned, these ones were by far the worst, because not only were they blowing things up, but they were setting my entire wooden island, emphasis on the wood, on fire. I had to scramble around to put the flames out, and just when you broke one flame block, 2 more spawned. I was so worried that the entire island was gonna go up in flames. Yes, the nether was my favorite phase, but it did have some of the most deadly monster parties. And I did not appreciate getting the chests blown up. After that, I crafted an enchanting table, because there was one thing that I absolutely needed: silk touch. You see, for the next fin that we were gonna make, it was gonna be nether themed, and I wanted to include some quartz blocks in there. I couldn't do that unless I had the silk touch enchantment. So I had to go find a villager, and we were gonna have to make him into a librarian. If I wanted silk touch, then I was gonna have to cycle through so many enchanting books. I ended up having to break and replace the lectern over and over again. Although the lectern was out of reach, so I had to break a slab, and as soon as I did that, Kanish ran away. I caught him sleeping, so I forced him to get back to work. We cycled through so many enchantments, some of them pretty decent, but I had to stop myself when it got to mending. I know it wasn't what we were looking for, but mending is pretty good. I couldn't pass it up. Now, I did have to come to terms with the fact that it was taking way too long to cycle through all the trades. If I wanted silk touch, then I was just gonna have to get it through an enchanting table, which meant I had to kill a lot of cows. Reason being, we needed leather for books. With the little cows separated, I put down the big cows, collected their leather, and crafted my books. We finally had a maxed out enchanting table set up, and while it did look a little ugly, it didn't matter because it got the job done. Minimalism for the win. I wanted to enchant a netherite pickaxe, so I melted down the netherite, crafted a smithing table, and prepared to make the ultimate tool. With the ingots now complete, all I had to do was combine them with a diamond pickaxe. Simple enough, right? Wrong again. Thanks to the glorious 1.20 update, I needed an extra item. Some type of netherite upgrade tablet, I don't know what it's called, but I didn't have it. Well, I put my pickaxe in the enchanting table, hoped for the best, and picked the level 30 enchantment with the hopes that I would get what was there, plus a little bonus. I got Fortune 3, and that was it. I took a break from enchanting, went up to the upper level, and started working on the nether section of our island. I randomly placed the netherrack around, making it random, leaving gaps in between, because in those gaps we were going to put blocks like soul sand, soul soil, that one magma block, just a nice array of nether blocks that made it look like another floor. When the floor was complete, I had to figure out what I was going to put because it was still way too plain. So I had to opt for those nether mushrooms. All of a sudden, a chest spawned. A super chest with the upgrade that we needed, along with some netherite scraps, golden apples, and a bunch of other goodies. I went back to the smithing table and finally upgraded my diamond pickaxe to netherite level. I then went back to the surface, took some of those vines, I think they're called warp roots, and I started placing them around, hoping that they would start growing upwards. Shortly after, I crafted a second diamond pickaxe, with the hopes that I could enchant it and still get silk touch. Now you'd think the cherry tree phase would be very peaceful, but it wasn't. There were bees, and they were angry. Let me tell you, as soon as I was stung by one bee, I wasn't even gonna fight them. I ran for my life and just hoped that they would fly away. When I went back to the nether section, the vines had grown, as did the mushrooms. With my bee stings now healed, I was gonna start working on the nether fin. And for the base, I was gonna use basalt and Deepslate. Once the base was complete, I had to gather a lot of netherrack because we were gonna cover the entire fin. Well, more like half of it. Eventually, our netherrack levels were starting to be depleted, so we had to substitute some of the blocks with soul sand and soul soil. As for the very top of the fin, we decided to crown it with glowstone, magma blocks, and gold. The 4 fins were finally complete, as was the nether section of the island. And at one point, we eventually got our cherry tree saplings. When I grew one with bone meal, I fully understood why these were something people wanted added for the longest time. For the cherry tree section, I wanted to go for this mossy stone path. More moss than stone, of course. I wanted it to look overgrown. I then planted bamboo in separate sections. I was hoping that they would all grow to decent heights, maybe even taller than the cherry trees. Back in the first section where we planted our oak saplings, I wanted to change it up a little. A whole section dedicated to oak, that was just too boring. So I chopped some of them down and replaced them with birch saplings instead. I went back down to the 1 block and started mining this next phase called idle. There was a lot of quartz, and I mean a lot of quartz. With the birch trees now grown, I went back to place down the frog lights and finish the floor. This time, I wanted to incorporate sugarcane in the design, so I placed down little pools of water so that they could grow. I then took some inspiration from the birch biome that we never got and added beehives, and lastly, as a finishing touch, I added some flowers. By this point, the bamboo had grown in the cherry tree section, and I had some cherry tree leaves, so I placed them down to make these pink shrubs. I went back to the 1 block, started mining until another monster party came, this one full of slimes and phantoms. Like always, the slimes were pretty easy to defeat. As for the phantoms, they proved to be a little more trickier, but eventually one of them did escape, but I was able to quickly eliminate him with my trident. It seemed like the outer ring was finally taking its glorious form. But we had to focus a little more attention on the center. This wooden platform, it was just too plain for the things that were to come, so it was time to upgrade that too with the quartz slabs. With a lot of slabs, a lot of calcite, and eventually some Deepslate slabs as well, we started covering the wood platform. At the end of the day, we were left with what looked like a really large chessboard. In my opinion, it was a huge improvement over the plain brown textures of the wood block. So we had the inner island and the outer ring, but between those two, we also had the large gaps in between. I wanted to fill them in and make little biomes out of them, so I had to fill the insides with slabs. And for the spruce one, I even added some berry bushes. And then I went to a ring that was above the center island, planted some vines because I was going to combine them with cobblestone to make mossy cobblestone. I went back to the spruce forest area and added some carpet to simulate snow because we had 2 types of spruce biomes I wanted to make. The snowy one, and then the one with the berry bushes, you know, the regular forest. I don't know what it's called. After that, I began work on an artificial frozen pond. I surrounded the pond with snow, and then after that I had to brainstorm about what I was going to put around because I didn't have a lot of snow blocks on me, so I ended up opting to place cobblestone boulders nearby. Back on the other side, I ended up placing mud, dirt, moss. By the time I was done with both sides, they represented the same biome, but they were experiencing different seasons. One snowy, one sunny. Now what we did for the other sections of the island, we were going to have to do for the nether section as well. But the fact is, I was basically out of netherrack. So I had to put something to the test. I built another portal with the hopes that on the other side, we would have the entire dimension full of blocks just ready to be mined. And to my surprise, my hunch was correct. There was the entire nether biome just there with tons of blocks, more than I could ask for. So I took my pickaxe, I mined as much as I could carry, and then I went back and finished off the section. With a little bone meal, I was even able to grow some of the nether foliage. The only thing I didn't like was that straight down the middle was this big white line just splitting up the whole section. So I had to break that and fill it in with an assortment of nether blocks, netherrack, soul sand. I even added the magma blocks and the quartz ores that I was talking about earlier. Thank you, Silk Touch. All that was left to do now was to ignite some of the blocks on fire. I ended up borrowing some soul soil from the fin that we had built because I wanted blue fire for the other section as well. While mining, I ended up running into our old soup cow. I don't know how he was still alive, but hey, good for him. I placed the soul soil, lit it on fire, and that completed our beautiful nether section. Now we had to figure out a way to make a boring oak forest pretty, so I started with a pond. That way we could fill up a huge gap of the empty space. I outlined it with moss and grass. I even threw in lily pads. After that, I went down to the lower levels and broke up our wheat farm. The wheat farm was gonna go in this new upper section, just to add some color. You know, beautiful golden wheat fields. That, and I needed more dirt, and that was the only place we had it. I tilled the soil, planted the seeds. I was running out of dirt and grass blocks, so I had to fill in the gaps with a cobblestone and andesite path. I planted some sugarcane, used a little bone meal to grow some grass, and by that point, I think we had a pretty good looking garden. Another section was complete, but we still had more to work on. This time it was time to harvest our vines. They had grown long enough and it was time to put them to good use. With the vines cut and collected, I went back to the one block to mine it a few more times because there were a few resources that I still needed. But once that was done, I returned to the cherry tree biome area that we were working on and started creating these tiny little islands with bamboo plants in the middle, and then I filled in the entire thing with water. Lots of water. The result was this beautiful little zen pond. I had some leftover lily pads, so I just threw them on top of the water, just to add that extra touch. We were getting to the end, and there was one more section we had to complete, and all of it was going to be dependent on this little cherry tree sapling. While I was waiting for that thing to grow, I went back to our little pond area and saw that all of our wheat was fully matured. The sapling was still growing, so I decided to spruce up the pond a little more by adding koi fish. Well, they are salmon, but they look like koi fish. I even added some axolotls to the oak pond. I mean, that's gotta be better than living in a bucket, right? We had a lot of diamonds, so for the sake of the thumbnail, I was just gonna add some diamond armor onto my body as well. By the time we were done with that, the cherry tree sapling had finally matured into a full-grown tree. Now, we didn't need the wood, but we did need the leaves, because we were gonna be making a lot of bushes. I wanted the bushes to be really pink, so at the base underneath of them, I decided to place the cherry tree logs. After that, I carried over the design where we just had a mossy floor, and next to the pink bushes, I added some azalea shrubs. I felt like this area needed a little more color, so I started spamming one of the flower bushes with a bone meal. And with that, we finished our cherry tree garden. I think it has a peaceful vibe to it. You know, the type of place where you'd find some butterflies and bees. I had filled in every section of our island. I'm pretty happy with the result because honestly, this thing turned out way better than I expected. We had the cherry trees, the nether, the oak biome, the snow biome, the spruce biome, a whole section where we had all the sugarcane we could harvest. It was perfect. Every little section was unique. And to think we were able to start all of this with one simple block. Well folks, looks like we've reached our 100th day once again. I hope you enjoyed the video as much as I enjoyed making it. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. If you had fun, don't forget to like, and if you're new to the channel, feel free to subscribe. Let me know what you thought in the comments down below. I will see you next time. This has been Double Sal. Thanks for watching.